Climate change leaves us with questions, not just about how fast the water is rising, but everyday things like, is it ever going to be too hot to live here? And how can I reduce flooding in my neighborhood? In a new podcast from WWNO, WRKF, and PRX, reporter Travis Lux and comedian Lauren Malera explore some of those questions from a city at the forefront of climate change, New Orleans, Louisiana. It's called Life Raft. Climate change is scary, but Life Raft is not. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Civics 101 is brought to you by Progressive, one of the country's leading providers of auto insurance. With Progressive's Name Your Price tool, you say what kind of coverage you're looking for and how much you want to pay. And Progressive will help you find options that fit within your budget. Use the Name Your Price tool and start an online quote today at progressive.com. Price and coverage match, limited by state law.
Civics 101 is supported in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
When you visit the Capitol, you enter through the Capitol Visitor Center. Since 1800, Congress has met here in Washington, D.C. to represent the people and make laws.
It's been said that government was invented to prevent violence, but governments can also perpetrate violence.
This room was named Emancipation Hall to honor the enslaved people who worked to build the Capitol.
And become the target of violence.
Today, the departing president incited a group of supporters outside the White House. He repeated the lie that he had won the election.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
The United States Capitol building, the very symbol of Western democracy, has the scars to prove it.
In Washington, D.C., ruthless, fanatic violence erupted in the halls of Congress. 3 men and a woman, believed to be members of the Puerto Rican nationalist gang, opened fire from the visitors' gallery of the House of Representatives. 5 congressmen were hit.
I'm Jackie Fulton. This is Civics 101. Today, we're talking about the history of politically motivated violence at the Capitol building. The Capitol is one of the nation's most heavily guarded buildings with its own dedicated police force, the United States Capitol Police. But it's also a very public building, a monument open to citizens, and a working office building for thousands of people. The first breach of the Capitol occurred during the War of 1812, a war between the Americans and the British over territory and trade.
4,000 British soldiers lay siege to Washington, D.C. and set fire to the U.S. Capitol and the White House.
The heat was intense. The glass in the skylights melted, became molten, and fell down in large chunks.
One of the most notable incidents of violence occurred in 1856, the savage beating of Senator Charles Sumner for his abolitionist views by a House member.
President Brooks walked up to Charles Sumner, raised his cane, made a couple of unfriendly remarks, and brought that gold-handled cane down on the top of Charles Sumner's head.
Sumner barely survived his injuries. His blood stained the Senate floor. President Andrew Jackson narrowly avoided an assassination attempt while attending a funeral at the Capitol in 1835.
As the president exited the funeral, Lawrence drew a pistol from his pocket and fired, but only the cap fired. Even though he was 67 and in poor health, the president charged Lawrence with a cane.
The building has been bombed 3 separate times.
The single bomb set off by a timing device left the men's room a shambles, plumbing demolished, bricks and plaster ripped from walls.
In 1971, an extremist group, the Weather Underground, a group that used violence to force political and social change, set off a bomb in the men's room.
There was alarm for a time that other bombs might still be hidden inside the Capitol. Police used dogs.
Fortunately, no people were injured in any of the bombings. The same cannot be said of shootings. In 1998, 2 police officers died in the line of duty.
Apparently, the gunman mingled with tourists and approached the Capitol from the east side. He entered by what is called the document door, an entrance that members of Congress share with members of the public. He exchanged gunfire with security officers.
While violence in the Capitol isn't unheard of, the insurrection on January 6th is unlike anything that's ever happened before. But eventually, the building was secured, and Congress went back to the floor of the Senate and finished the work that had been interrupted.
The violence was quelled. The Capitol is secured, and the people's work continues.